Hi, I wanted to do a quick little follow-up. I realized I didn't talk about this on the podcast last week, so I wanted to kind of get this out of my brain before it's way too far out. So if you don't remember, I recently purchased a VR headset. I actually purchased the MetaQuest 3S, but I ended up changing it out for a MetaQuest 3. I returned that one and then bought a used MetaQuest 3. So yes, I did that. But buying a VR headset, primarily I wanted to check out various DLSite games. And I've already talked about two games that I got off there. One is Cooperating with the Giantness. There's a video for that up on the YouTube channel. The other one was Midnight Sanctuary, which I played the Steam release because I did not realize when I bought it off DLSite that there was an actual English release on other platforms. So, but I did buy it off DLSite with the intention of it being in a DLSite kind of a space kind of thing. But there's probably about like 5 or 6 other games I checked out, and some of these are just not big enough for their own videos. I'd say most of these aren't really big enough for their own videos, so I figured just kind of like get them out here in the in bulk. I think out of all of these, maybe the first and the last one are my favorites. So the first one's not super flashy though. The first one's a game called Gun Shooting Training VR. Supposedly, if you launch the client, it actually says Fitness Shooter VR. It's a very basic game. Most of these DLSite games we're going to look at, if you don't know DLSite, it's a Doujin website. And we're looking at the all-age friendly stuff. I haven't like done anything with the 18 plus stuff or anything like that, and I don't know if I ever will. There's not that much when it comes to like all age friendly stuff on DLSite though. When it comes to VR, we'll say it's pretty limited. It's very early kind of VR era kind of games, I feel like. But anyway, so Fitness Shooter VR, Gun Shooting Training VR, whichever you want to believe it to be. It's both names seem to be true. It is really cool. It's a little kind of just, cover shooter essentially, but super basic. Everything is just kind of simple shapes. Even your gun is just like a block. There's 2 shapes of block. I think one has like 2 blocks connected to each other, and that's like a rifle. And then there's one that's like a solid flat block, and that's like a machine gun kind of thing. So you can switch between the 2 different types of guns. And then there's different shapes in the distance. And depending on the color of the shape or the actual shape of the shape, it depends kind of how it shoots at you. So you have this little wall in front of you, and you have to duck under it to get in cover, basically. So when it shoots at you, you need to get down and make sure your head, because the headset's what it's tracking, is below this wall. And you can move this wall up and down, and you can kind of cheat it if you really want. The game doesn't even really check to make sure you're not out of cover. You can shoot through the cover and it's like fine, but I feel like you're going against the spirit of the game at that point. But you can kind of set the wall to whatever height you want. But the big thing is, and why it might be also called Fitness Shooter VR, is essentially it's a game that's going to constantly ask you to squat down. So, as you go through the early stages, you're not going to do it very much. I think you have like 4 or 5 shots until you're dead. So, you have some leeway there. But yeah, you basically go in and out of cover physically yourself. And you shoot enemies that way. I think also going in cover reload your gun as well, potentially. I think that's also the case. I think you need to get down to reload. So it's a lot of going up and down. And so true to its name, Fitness Shooter, it is definitely a fitness shooting game. I found I forget how many stages there are, but there's a hefty number of stages. And, I'm not exactly in great shape. I would say right now I'm in probably one of the worst shapes of my life right now. So if you're like fit, buff man, I can take any VR fitness experience. I'm going to guess Fitness Shooter VR is not that that challenging, but definitely like towards the end, I was like struggling. Squats are not something I normally do. So it was an interesting way to get your squats in kind of thing, and maybe something I should continue to do in the future kind of thing. But yeah, I just thought it was like super functional, even though it was really basic. I thought the gameplay loop was really, fun, like getting in and out of cover. It does definitely feel like there's definitely a sense of urgency. I feel like, having those like red bullets come at you really slowly. And like, so it's just like, I don't know, it's just like, it just feels really good to play, which is like a really hard thing to describe sometimes. And I think one thing that should be kept in mind is like, I haven't played that many VR games. So not only are these simple DLSite games, none of these are going to be impressive. Some of these are my first experiences like interacting with VR in some different way, but I thought that was like a really fun way to get some squats in. I don't think there's any variety though. There was like a question mark mode to the left side, but even though I got through the whole thing, it did not unlock. So I don't know what that question mark mode is, if there's a way to unlock it or anything like that. But probably out of all the games I'm playing here, in terms of just like a functionality perspective, gun shooting training VR, fitness shooter VR, I think it's under the name gun shooting training VR on DLSite. And, you know, for your guys' sake, I'll link all these in the description if you're interested. I think it's probably the most playable game out of all the ones I checked out. Maybe one that I would not super recommend is a game that I think is called something like Survive Kosho or something like that, or I'm not sure. There's a character, it's a guy with black hair. I don't know if he's an existing character, some random model or whatever. Sometimes like some characters like open up as like, you know, these kind of like weird open source characters that I don't understand. But yeah, it's basically this game where you spawn in a little arena and this guy very slowly runs at you. And you basically try to whack him until he's dead. But every time you get close to him, he starts to melee you. So you have to kind of like play this weird game of like jutting in and out, you know, being close to him or not. And he has some ranged attacks too, so you got to be like aware of that. He also has some special attacks that if you don't block them, it will cut one of your eyes out, I guess is maybe the way to put it, because like basically one of your sides of vision stop functioning, then the other side of your vision stops functioning after that. And then you're just like stuck there and you just gotta reset the game basically. You know, I don't think there's any like formal reset in the game, or maybe it's like there's like a button combination you have to press or something, but all these games are very janky, so I would not be surprised if you're just kind of stuck there blinded. But yeah, it's just not a lot to it though. It's just kind of like moving in and out of range of this guy and trying to like poke him with whatever you have. You can either hit him with your fist. There's also a sword, but that sword, like, it's fine. It just gives you some extra reach, basically. It doesn't seem to, like, add anything. I mean, it's a VR game, and I think most weapons in VR games eventually become, like, how much can you flail this and what's the reach? Which is, like, where I think it's a little hard to balance melee combat in VR games, it feels like. But let me know if you feel otherwise. There is a third sword that's, like... So the sword I use is kind of, like, more of a standard knight sword, if I recall correctly. Then there's also, like, a samurai-looking sword. But when I went to go to try to grab it, it just kind of bounced off my hand and then, like, floated into the sky with low gravity. So I don't think you can actually use the sword, or I'm not sure. It's like a little hub you start in. It's just like a weird little thing, because you can either get the main sword, just go fight the guy without any weapon, or there's also this little house that is like an aesthetic house. But when you go into it, it's actually like a garage. And there's nothing in it. It's just like a weird garage, because this game has like a sword and sorcery kind of look to it. So it's strange that there's just like a garage in the middle of this void, basically. But yeah, I'd say this game out of all of them was probably the most like disappointing, because it was just kind of like go and waggle, you know, as close as you can to them and then kind of back off kind of thing. I do think that one of the things I'd be curious about when I think about like Skyward Sword on the Wii, right? Skyward Sword on the Wii gave you reasons to swing the remote in certain ways. Red Steel 2. And maybe to some extent Red Steel 1, but nobody thinks about Red Steel 1 when it comes to like sword combat. Other than, you know, it being disappointing, I feel like. Maybe I shouldn't say nobody, but I am not aware of any people who think Red Steel 1's melee combat's like particularly good. But Red Steel 2 and things like that, those games really force you to swing those swords in like appropriate ways. You can waggle them a little bit, but the game is really built around you swinging them in appropriate ways. And so I don't really know how a VR game does that. I'm sure there's probably examples of that out there. I'm sure there's plenty of people who tried to solve that problem and may have solved that problem. But Survive Kosho or whatever it's called did not solve that problem. So again, these are all very low budget. Like, there's not even like collision on the arena. You can like walk outside the arena and he'll like slowly chase you. This one's not really a game as it is like a little edutainment kind of thing. Although I couldn't really appreciate it fully. It is a VR job interview, and it basically lets you go in two different scenarios. Basically, one where you're doing an in-person interview, and one where you're doing one remotely. So you can either sit down at this table with this laptop that's like a Zoom chat, or you can sit across the table of like people in person. Being a DLSite game, it's a Japanese game, and so the characters are, I think they're like Vocaloid style characters, or maybe they're called like Vroids or something like that. I don't remember exactly what they are. They sit there and they'll just like ask you questions in Japanese, and then there's a little timer that appears that I think is basically showing you how long it's taking you to answer this question, basically. So the intention is that these characters ask you a question, and then you give a response, right? And these are probably some very generic, I would imagine, interview questions. I get one person on Twitter translated it, and one was like about like, what do you do if your coworker is like violating or like ignoring compliance standards or something like that, or doing something dangerous in the workplace or something like that. And so then you're supposed to like, give a response kind of thing. So it's intended for that. And as somebody still trying to find work regularly, I was like, maybe this would be helpful, but no, I don't know Japanese. I'm useless here. I'm useless at this company that I'm interviewing for. So but I think it's a cute idea. And it's one of those things where it's like, part of me is like, I want to kind of put myself in the position a little bit. So there's like this chair, and you can like, I like rolled out my my office chair and like sat it in kind of the middle of the room and like sat down there. But without knowing the questions, there's not really any tension to it. I'm just kind of sitting in this chair as these characters like talk at me, and they don't check or anything for what you're saying. I'm also remembering, this is like part of why it's a problem that I haven't looked at this in a while. There's something weird with like a character in the void at some point. Like I ended up in some weird room at some point. I don't know if it's like an Easter egg or something like that or what. But there's like this weird room. I guess check out VR job interview and find the weird little room. I don't remember there being anything meaningful in there, but it's there. It's not job interview room. It is a different room for those two rooms. So the next game is called VR Hentai Shooter. This is one that I probably spent the most time playing. I'm sorry, I got the name wrong. VR Hentai parentheses, not really, shooter. So this is not actually like hentai in any way. It's not perverted or any way. It is somebody just trying to figure out how you make a shooter in VR, basically. It is like somebody's test, essentially. It's all kind of Unreal Engine assets and stuff like that. And I would say it's surprisingly complete for what it is. It's basically just like a little obstacle course kind of thing, if you want to call it that, where you have individual rooms, and each room has different like combat setups. So you start without a weapon, so you have to pick up these like bouncy balls and throw it to distract the guys. You can go get a gun, and then you can go shoot them, kind of thing. And so there's like a series of maybe like 10 rooms total, not a lot, where you go through and you fight these guys. It is pretty elaborate in the sense of like you have an inventory system. You can pick up grenades, you can pick up like first aid sprays. There's different types of guns. So I said the inventory system was a little buggy on my side. It felt like sometimes I just put stuff in my backpack and just disappear. So I'm not quite sure what would happen. So usually I would like keep my guns and ammo out just to make sure, because you can just drop them on the floor and go find them. It's a little inconvenient, but it's fine. And I don't think there's any way to like move smoothly in this game. If I recall correctly, you have to like bounce around a little bit, where you kind of like point, and then it like kind of lets you shoot yourself to some place, basically. I think a lot of early kind of VR games did this, where they were worried about you getting sick while you were moving in VR, so they like had you teleport, basically. So it's definitely a bit cumbersome though, and I think reading the readme is kind of important, because the grenades have like a very particular way they work. You have to like press this button and then hold it for this amount of time, and then it like beeps and you can throw it. And then the health spray you can pick up, but like it only really sprays if you like point it towards your chest, I think, as a way to like stop you from accidentally using it. And you have like a little health bar in the menu, but it's all really cumbersome in the way that like somebody's first draft for something like this probably would be. I think it was like pretty solid overall, though. But I think in the world where I think shooting things in VR is probably fairly common across a lot of different games. When a game like Half-Life Alyx exists on VR, me not having played that, I'm gonna take a shot that VR hentai, not really, shooter is probably not anything special in that regard, unless you really just want to see somebody sitting there like tinkering with what VR can be. I kind of find that stuff interesting, even if it's not that that unique. Like some ways, like it being more simple makes it more interesting to me to some extent. So even the end, it's just a room that says like end or finish on it, and there's nothing to do. I just like shot my gun in the air and then close the game, basically. So, VR abs. This is another workout game. But you are just in a white void, and there's like a little thing that shows you, you know, where you need to like sit up to, basically. And then, and there's like an anime girl who sits there and so you're supposed to do sit-ups to this anime girl, you know. I think kind of, I don't know actually. Is it like a thing in, I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen like an anime where like a guy gets paired with a girl or something, and then he has to like do sit-ups while she holds his ankles down or something. And if that's ever been considered like a romantic experience in an anime or something like that. But, you know, you're supposed to, you have this anime girl in front of you, and you sit there and you do the sit-ups in front of her kind of thing. I believe you can import your own character model somehow. I don't know what the format is. There is some, like, interface for that, but I didn't really know what to do with it. So, and I don't have, whatever character model that was, I don't have one of those. So, anyway. The biggest problem with this game was kind of two things. One is I was using a Quest 3S at the time, and the lenses on that get very like blurry if the headset isn't on just right. And so this game, like you moving your whole upper body up and down, it really shook my headset around in a way that it was like hard to keep that focus right. So I'd be like looking and everything would just be completely blurry. I also had quite a few times where I'd be doing sit-ups and my sit-up counter would just reset. I think because either I pressed a button or something in the world itself like got like tagged by my finger or something like that when I was, you know, having the controllers. I don't know if you need the controllers. Maybe just lay the controllers down. I don't know. So I was having some trouble with that as well. And then also I felt like, and this very much could have been a user error. Like I was having trouble keeping the headset on properly. But I think with the 3S in particular, I wore my headset a lot looser typically because I did not like having the cloth pads like really pushed into my face really hard. So I was like trying to alleviate that a little bit. But with the 3, I wonder if it would be as big of a deal because that one has like I have like an external battery that kind of like has it like I don't know what you'd call it, like wedge onto my head in a way that's way more secure. Although if I like do it too tight, it's definitely like way more uncomfortable. So. The second to last game here, before we get into the GOAT, that's maybe not GOAT, I don't know, the most weirdest interesting one on here, this one's not that, the next one is, Yuko's Only Up. So I think there's a game on Steam called Only Up. I'm not super into, like, what is the modern Steam audience into these days, but there are these games where you basically climb random objects into the sky. I've seen a bunch of parodies of this and stuff, and Yuko's Only Up is a parody of that. It is from somebody who made like a Kogan like VR Doujin game. If you don't know what Kogan is, it's like a 2D platformer on the Switch, like or maybe action platformer kind of thing. It kind of like vaguely has a Gunvolt feel if you're familiar with that franchise. But for some reason, this Doujin group like wanted to make VR games with these characters and made like 3D models for them, or used some 3D models I got from somewhere, I'm not sure. But this one is basically you just like climbing up a bunch of objects and stuff into the sky. I will say, if you're looking at the gameplay on screen right now, if you're looking at that, there's a good chance that like a lot of stuff is like clipping into my face. You can like recenter the model properly. I did not really do that properly at the time, so I was like getting a bunch of like weird like character model debris into my face. But yeah, I mean, I wrote down here it's a platformer, but like I have a hard time even really calling it that. I mean, it's definitely a platformer, but it's just kind of like a trail that goes into the sky. And so it's about kind of identifying what's the part of this object that I jump to this object, which obviously like all 3 like platformers kind of are, but like devoid of anything else. I don't think it's like that interesting. I think the big thing is like the fear of falling all the way down, right? Like the fear of I'm at the very top and where am I going to land if I fall off this thing, right? And this game in particular, I think, doesn't really have a lot of challenge in that regard. I don't think I fell once. So I think I got all the way up in one shot. So not a lot of value in that regard, I guess. But it's kind of funny because like It just doesn't seem to care because like at some point it takes you outside the skybox to finish the level. And I'm like, sure, like whatever. You just like go through the skybox to go outside of whatever like orb you're in, basically. So, and it doesn't look intentional. It just looks like weird. But you know, whatever is again DLSite content. Like this is all very low effort stuff, and I would be surprised someone's just like, yeah, just have you go out of the skybox. That's funny, and they just left it at that. So, and like part of that's like the DLSite charm of everything's janky. But like it plays fine as far as I can tell. I don't really feel like I have a lot of like strong memories of it. I just remember looking down in front of me and there being stuff that I had to jump between, and like none of it was like particularly hard though. I guess maybe the hardest part was like the potted plants, but you have a lot of air control and things like that, so maybe that's part of it too. It actually has an online mode as well where you think you can do like direct IP connections and things like that too. So if you want to do that, but I'm guessing out of the only up games out there, there's probably better ones out there, unless you really want to be a Kogan character when playing it. So, and the last one, the one that I think was maybe the most time consuming, maybe the one that you can't actually play in VR really. It's called VR Cosplay Kagura. So I bought this game, and it said it was VR compatible. And I played it on PC, and I could not find a way to do VR on PC. So what I did find was the mobile version has a VR thing. So I was able to load that, I think it's called an APK or something like that, onto my VR headset. And it still didn't work quite properly because I'd click it and it basically would still act like it was an application running in front of me rather than like in an actual VR setup. And it just had the two separate views. So there may be a world where you can play VR Cosplay Kagura properly with a VR headset. Maybe it's like set up to be on a phone with like one of those old cardboard setups. Maybe that's what it's looking for. But you know, I don't know. I don't have one of those things set up. So maybe someday I will do that. But for now, I just play it on my PC. But it's basically just a clicker. You have this girl who has like a bodysuit on or something. I don't know. And she doesn't really respond to you. So you go into this field and you click on 3 different things. You click on fruit. You click on Kagura's head, like her head just falls out of the sky. Or there's also little TV screens. And those TV screens just appear as far as I can tell. Maybe they fall too and I just didn't pay attention enough. But anyway, so you're just in this field and you basically turn, like it's 360 degrees around you. This stuff's all just falling and respawning in however they're working out. The fruit and the heads definitely just fall in. And you just click them and you get more and more points. And as you get more and more points, depending on what you're collecting, Kagura will start to feel. So you're like opening her heart basically, I believe is the concept of the game. And then also she gets different like outfits and stuff. And then I think the fruit upgrades the rate at which things fall in the world. I could be misremembering that, but basically things upgrade as they fall down. Or as you pick them up if they fall down. So you get more and more stuff that falls down. Also, you get different types of things that fall down. So initially it's all apples and those are 1 point each. Then there's pears, which are, 5 points. And then there's, I think it's like cherries or something. And those are like, 20 points or something like that. And then on the Kagura side, there is the tiny Kagura head. That's 1 point. There's the giant Kagura head. That's 5 points. And there's the golden Kagura head, which I think is actually 100 points. And then the TV screen's always just the TV screen. So you just kind of sit here and click a bunch. And that's kind of it. And you unlock all these things and you can go back out into the world where Kagura is. And you can basically like look around her character model. And she's like, she's not very well modeled. It's a very janky looking 3D model. I don't know if Kagura is like an existing character or if this is like someone's just like OC that they made basically. Or whatever, this is the story they wanted to tell. But it's pretty janky, but it's supposed to be mostly like sexy outfits, like nurse outfits, bunny suits, and things like that. And And, but like a lot of stuff like clipping into each other and stuff like that. So I don't think it like comes off as like particularly attractive, I guess. But maybe my favorite thing is, so there's the TV screens. When you collect those, you unlock, I think there's 5 videos total. And when you unlock these videos, they are insane in just the quality of them, because like they're basically just like, I think they're called gravure videos or something like that, where basically it's just this, it's like the Kagura's posed and the camera kind of like rotates around her and stuff. And for some reason, I don't know why, it's like a recording of this camera mode. So I don't know if maybe just this is not a part of the game. They just like loaded this character in a 3D model and they went to record like a video of this character posing in different ways. But but it's recorded at like 10 frames per second. I don't know. It's very slow. And like the person's mouse cursor is on the screen. And like some of them have like watermarks for the recording software they're using. It's just insane, and just like how low quality it is. But that's like makes it all the much better. Of just like, yeah, it's like, yeah, you figure you got it in there. You figured it out. So like, despite the whole game being incredibly janky, like. It's the one I probably appreciate the most, because it feels like somebody was trying to do something and they got somewhere, and then they put it out in the world and say, why don't you pay for this? And like, I can only respect that, because it's not like no effort was put into this thing. Effort was put in. It just feels like somebody who didn't know how to do it. And I think that's like makes it somewhat appealing, of just like, there's clearly heart in this, but yeah, it's kind of one of the most janky looking things that I've played. So unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to play it in VR. But I will say, if I were to imagine best case scenario, put my VR imagination in place, like sitting around in the field and just like clicking on stuff, probably wouldn't be too bad. The only problem is that like it is like multiple hours of you clicking on stuff. I forget how long it was, but definitely at least 2 or 3 hours, I think. I sat there and just like clicked and clicked and clicked and clicked and clicked. You can kind of like cheese the TV screens a little bit, because they are always spawned when you first come in. So you can like leave the room, click the TV screen, leave the room, click the TV screen, do that, like, or like leave and enter, and the TV screen will always be spawned, because the TV has a really slow spawn timer for some reason. So, but yeah, that was it. That was my DLSite Doujin VR journey. I think out of all the games, I think, the previous 2 videos I did, Cooperating with the Giantness and Midnight Sanctuary, those were some of my favorite there. Gun Shooting Training VR and Fitness Shooter VR. I think that's like a really good game as well. So Midnight Sanctuary and Fitness Shooter VR, Gun Training VR, whatever it's called. I recommend those to you. I think you should check them out. I think they're neat. Cooperating with a Giantess, I think you have to be like in a very specific mindset of like wanting to try something like that out. But VR cosplay Kagura, you probably can't get the VR working unless, I would love to know. If you get it working, I would love to know. But like, I would only really recommend it if you're the type of person like me who would just enjoy seeing something like that. It's just like, just the fact this thing exists in the form it exists is like half the magic of that game, right? And I appreciate that. I appreciate that somebody built that out. So anyways, that's gonna be it. I've mostly been doing VR chat after all this, so I'll probably do a follow-up thing on VR chat, either on the podcast or maybe if I get impatient, do a video or something, but we'll see. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for listening. Bye.